To celebrate the launch of our new program, Defence Against Dark Arts, I've been sharing some things that I don't normally talk about in public. Given the nature of the program, this is appropriate. In the last letter, I discussed a major attack on me that happened fairly recently. And I received a lot of emails and queries about that, something I mentioned in the newsletter, which was the first time I encountered it, I delayed action in a WTF moment, which allowed it to act first, never again. Kind of intriguing, but to give you the rest of the story, this started about just over 10 years ago when a woman in the EU, in Europe, contacted me asking me for help withstanding what she thought was a magical attack, which resulted from her recently breaking away from a magical group over there, and they had not parted on good company, so there was some bad feelings there. And this is a high-risk case because normally if you break away from a magical group or order, then there is often some retaliation, and so you have to take care. Now, it did raise a few eyebrows with me that an advanced occultist would ask me for help and advice weathering a magical attack. And I'm thinking, a person like that should know how to look after themselves, one would think. Anyway, even though I felt a bit strange about it, I agreed to help. And I helped her and advised her over about a year, and the situation progressively got better. And the first piece of advice I gave her was a bit radical to her, and it took some convincing, was to self-reflect on what had happened and to apologise to everybody involved as best she could. Now, in Defence Against Dark Arts and my book, The Practical Psychic Self-Defense Handbook, rule number 1 is if you are suspicious of somebody psychically attacking you, to break contact with them and make amends with them, apologise as best you can, but breaking contact is very, very important. Now, I helped this woman for a year, and she was very nice, very compassionate soul. I quite liked her. I suspect she wanted a bit more than just friendship from me, but I kept it strictly professional and was very careful in that sense. And things were going well, and all of a sudden she got upset about something, I had no idea what it was, and broke contact with me. And that was it. I never heard from her for a very long time. And almost 10 years passed, and all of a sudden she contacted me again and apologised for breaking contact so abruptly, years ago, and wanted my help and advice again. Now, after about a year helping this woman, and it was not so much magical advice after a while, it was it changed our relationship into more of life guidance and counselling and just generally helping and supporting her, which was working, and she was feeling really good. Now, at this point, everything was going well, and in my life, I have life outside of that, nothing was going on. I hadn't upset anybody, nothing. And one night, out of the blue, I came under an attack. I went to bed around midnight, I think it was, and turned the lights out. And not long after then, I saw this messy ball of string spinning around in the far corner of the room near the ceiling. And this looked like a ball of string about the size of a softball with lots of loose ends spinning around, and it was light and dark grey with deep black and little staticky sparks in it. Looked quite innocuous, but a bit weird, and my first impression of it was it looked bad, pretty nasty. Not a friendly sort of an apparition at all. Now, I just observed it, and probably 10 seconds or so went by as I was observing it, wondering, what is this? And then it struck. It lunged at me, and in a split second, like as fast as a snake, it hit me in the left side of the chest. And my very next breath was bubbling as my lung rapidly filled up with fluid. Probably didn't fill up all the way, but there's a appreciable amount of uncomfortable fluid just filled into my lung. And then I realised that this was a really bad thing, and I did a banishment and a reversal. And I sent it back double, which is pretty standard when you do a reversal. And it ended, it disappeared, the banishment worked, and I was up, coughing and wheezing with fluid in my lung. And the next morning I went to a doctor, and he said I had pulmonary edema, which is fluid in the lung. And there was no fever, no real infection, and which there normally would be. So he gave me antibiotics, and they worked well, and within a few days I was feeling better. Now, I hadn't heard from this woman in a while for that week, and when she got back into contact with me, she said, "I'm sorry I haven't been around." It's like a week after the attack. She said, I was taken to hospital suddenly with double pneumonia. Like she had fluid in both of her lungs, and which was quite serious, apparently. And they took her to hospital and put her on IV antibiotics, and after a week it just went away. And I was suspicious, but I told her what had happened to me. I said, that's weird. Around about the same time, something like that happened to me, and I wondered if it was some kind of a psychic attack on her spilling over into me, because I've been helping her, giving her distance healing and etc. And it was just a coincidence, and nothing more happened. But a few weeks later, the same thing happened again. This time I delayed. I didn't really know what it was, and I didn't spot it straight away this time, like the first time I did. And the same whirling ball of, ugly looking evil string. And I observed, wondering what it wanted or what it was going to do. And it just never popped into my head to do a banishment more quickly. And it struck again. And this time I got a nasty infection in my right knee. And I did another banishment and a reversal and sent it back double. And same thing, I went to the doctors. He gave me antibiotics. I had an infection in my knee. There was no break in the skin. Scratching his head, wondering why. But it was obviously cellulitis or something like that in the knee. Now, a week later, I found that she had been struck down with a peculiar infection in both of her knees. And again, she'd been taken to hospital. And I didn't tell her this time that I'd had an attack that gave me an infection in one knee, because, just something, warned me not to. And so time went on, and over the next few months, this was happening every few weeks. She would get better, and then there'd be another attack. I got infections in one of my elbows. She got it in both. she got it in one of her shoulders. Sorry, I got it in one of my shoulders, and she got it in both shoulders. And there was about 7 attacks, if I remember, over that period of time. And then all of a sudden, she got angry about something. I'm unsure what it was, and broke contact with me again. And I mean, for the first time. And I couldn't contact her at all. She wouldn't reply to emails or anything. And so I just put it down to experience. And again, almost 10 years went by before she contacted me again. But that was a story that was missing from the last newsletter, when I had a much more major attack. And I think it was from the same source, because the entity that manifested beside me in the recent attack was very similar looking to the small evil ball of string that was appearing in my room. All the messy threads, and it was a much larger version of that, which manifested beside my bed, covered with messy-looking little short tendrils, and with several much larger ones, which were like vines. They even looked like they had like little leaves on the vine. So maybe it was some kind of nature spirit or nature-oriented spirit. It was definitely an earth element, earthbound type spirit, because the banishment worked, because the standard pentagram banishment banishes only the earth element. That's only what it does. It banishes earth element beings and earth element energy. So that tells you something about it. But I don't really know what that entity was. It's something I've not come across before. I mean, I've come across columns that look like black broomsticks of energy moving across the floor, and snakes and little miniature upside down twisters which are moving around on the floor, and I mean, plus the more classical types of entities and demons and things like that, but never ever come across anything quite like that.